corner looking north, so here's the town. And you see how small some of the trees are. And these are a couple of guys. So go to the next one. And this, I just zoomed in on that, and this is what the south side of the town looked like, just north of Russell Park. And go to the next one. And I had zoomed in, and those are the two young men lounging in the park with their straw boater hats on. I was amazed that turned out as well as it did, but at any rate, so in 1906, the park was beautified by a large number of flower beds of various shapes and sizes. In the August 23rd, 1906 B, the editor commented that the flower beds down at Russell Park are mighty pretty this year, and they give a hint of what may be done in this line in the future. But by 1919, scalawags were at work in the park flower beds. One woman reported to the bee that in the night, some miscreant pulled up and carried away a lot of new pansy plants I had just set out. And the editor said, anyone who would do this is in the same class with a sheep-killing dog. So by 1909, there were 3 intersecting gravel paths through the park, with entrances for vehicles on the east, the west, and the south. Which, I mean, these were not wide, but they were gravel paths that people could drive their early cars through. Although few photos exist, there was I found a grainy aerial map from the Iowa DOT taken in 1930 that clearly shows the 3 gravel roads, but it's too small and fuzzy to show here, but the drives were there. Michelle Fields at the courthouse told me they have no record showing them because they weren't official city streets. So for those interested, the south entrance was on Park Avenue, just east of Wilson Street, near Dr. Marshall's home. It ran under what are now the tennis courts. The west entrance on South Wilson Street was near the spot of the current gravel path, and the east entrance was on Chestnut Street near the current basketball court. So it's a little bit north. And you could go, it was like a giant X, and you could go all the way through the park by car. Okay, now we need that 1907 touring car in the park. That's it, and it needs to be a lot bigger. Yeah, we had issues with that.
Yeah, you have to go back.
At any rate, the car on this road was a Model T 1917 touring car. And note that there's a light post nearby, and this is the triangle, and there's a flagpole and a cannon sitting on it. And I had done a talk about the cannon earlier, but for those of you who are not familiar with it, it was a Civil War cannon that was later melted down for scrap metal for World War II purposes. But anyway, they're just out for a Sunday drive or something. So Mrs. now for the triangle mystery, the big event of the day, a bump in the park. So we'll go to a modern triangle, if you can find one. Mrs. Mary Russell had planned to contribute funds for the purpose of beautifying the triangle where the 3 roads intersected, and making of the same a flower bed which shall contain the name of the park on its 3 sides. So if you can think about what people did in bedding with bedding plants years ago, annuals, they would have a name, and they plant the plants and say the name. So she wanted Russell Park on all 3 sides of the triangle. By 1907, the park commissioners planned to fill the triangle with soil 4 to 5 feet deep to make the lettering prominent. But the triangle was planted with grass instead of flowers, and gently sloped, so each of its three sides were ornamented with lettering made of rocks, and they were painted white, and it spelled out Russell Park on all three sides, so everybody knew where they were. You never get lost in Jefferson, you know. Well, Mrs. Russell by that time lived in Hollywood and made a special donation to fund the project. I haven't found any photos of the mound with the white rocks. Perhaps they dislodged in heavy rains or disappeared into children's pockets, maybe? But by the time this photo, the photo with that 1917 Model T was taken, there was no lettering on the triangle sides. But the triangle was used for quite some time. Now we need to go to the fete, the coronation mound for the May Queen. It's all very fancy, you know.
That's back, the main.
Could be. There, this is it, yes. And the triangle was used for quite some time, not only as a raised intersection, but also as the grand coronation mound for the May Queen during Jefferson's May Fetes. F-E-T-E-S, it's kind of a British term for a festival. The women of the town wanted to raise money for the park to have bathrooms. It didn't have any bathrooms yet, didn't have any plumbing there. And that was pretty important for them, you know, especially when you've got little kids along. They were getting civilized city people. You weren't on the farm anymore. You couldn't just go wherever you felt like, you know. So at any rate, this picture, the fetes were held from 1913 to 15, and they did earn enough for plumbing. And this is one photo I had of it used as a coronation mound. And this is the car that brought her. They decorated these, they had huge parades downtown, and they all ended up at the park and had lots of musical events and games, and they had a maypole, so the children went around the maypole. And this, up here, triangle is the background, and the May Queen is on her crown, and you can see here there are steps that were kind of carpeted to go up that triangle, up on the triangle mound. And it was used, it was used as a coronation mound for a few years. And I have another story about the May Fetes, but not everybody's interested in that, perhaps. Plus it'll be a lot longer. So the triangle persists, and we need to go to Laurel and Hardy. Okay. And there are two small trees on top. So there isn't any, there's a bench there with two small trees, no Russell Park lettering, and no park roads intersecting there. It gets a little shorter with erosion every year, but the mound still provides a shady place to sit. You're wondering, why have I got Laurel and Hardy up? I mean, what the heck? Well, they were a famous pair of comedians from years past, and they were especially popular in the 1930s during the Depression, and there were a lot of people who slept on park benches, especially in the summer. They didn't have anywhere to go. But they brought up the importance of the park bench in one of their early movies. And in the movie, this pair, they are brought up against the court charged with vagrancy because a policeman said he found them sleeping in a city park. But they pleaded not guilty, sir. On what grounds? Asked the judge. On what grounds are you not guilty? And they said, well, we weren't on the ground, we were on a park bench. So that's it. That's what I have. I hope it explains some things. If anybody has any questions, then let me know.
Did you read how they chose the queen?
How they chose, I did not see that in the article, but there was an particularly interesting story about that. I don't know how the vote was held or anything. But I believe it was the 1915 May Fete, the young woman who was chosen as queen, the newspaper called her the prettiest girl in town, and unfortunately she died that fall. She had some previously, she'd always had some sort of heart issue, and by that fall she had died. And that is where if you look in the park, in the cemetery, there is a very unusual stone, burial stone of hers, because it looks kind of like an angel that's pointing. The family was wealthy, and they sent away for this marble statue of her, and they were quite heartbroken. But anyway, that mound was pretty busy for quite a few years. So if you sit up there, you can think about all that happened, but don't try to sleep on it. You might get in trouble. Yeah.
You can, did you
Oh.
documentation about it, when it was put there, and then...
I did, and you missed my talk that I gave earlier. I gave a talk, it was last winter, I think, but yeah, I did give a talk about the cannon, because I just heard people talking about, well, I heard there was a cannon there once, and I didn't know why, and I was able to find out that we had a lot of Civil War veterans here for a long time. A lot of people fought in the war, and they always felt that we should have a cannon, you know. And it wasn't in the park at first. It was by the courthouse, on the old courthouse north lawn. By the way, that lawn was called the old cow pasture for a lot of years. It wasn't called the North Courthouse lawn. And they had a big push to change the naming of that because, you know, it's much more elegant to call it the North Courthouse lawn. But anyway, so our VFW, it wasn't the VFW then, but Veterans of the Civil War, contacted the government to see if they could get a cannon. And so they were sent one. It was a howitzer, and I can't remember what model it was off the top of my head, but it was from a ship. And so they put it on the north lawn of the old courthouse for several years. And then when the new courthouse was built, one problem was the wooden wheels were rotting. And when the new courthouse was built, it was moved to Russell Park. And it wasn't, for part of the time it was on the mound, but for part of the time it was just on the ground beside the road. And they did put the wheels in concrete so that, you know, they wouldn't disintegrate. And there was also a story about a group of young guys. One reason they put the wheels in concrete and they disengaged any firing mechanism finally, because there was a group of young men when it was on the North Courthouse lawn who decided it was night, they could do a prank. So they put something in the firing chamber and they shot it off, and it worked. And they shot this big humongous piece of wood right down the alley on the north side of the square. It went down the alley, what would that be, between the bank, who is there now? The lawyer's office? Horax lawyer's office. There's an alley there, and it went right down the alley, missing a glass entrance door by just inches, which was kind of astounding. But anyway, so that's when they unhooked everything. Yeah.
Mikki, you mentioned the Gallups and their role, Henry Gallup, George Henry Gallup's role in draining the bark and developing that. Do you have any idea when they came to Jefferson or Greene County?
No, I didn't look that up.
Okay.
But, you know, he had been here for a while by, 1901. But I think the family had been here a while before that. But, yeah, who's to say? So, somebody else? Oh.
Did Russell own other land in the south part of town?
Yes, he owned quite a lot of the south part of town. That was his farmland, and that's one reason he was big on donating the parkland, because he also wanted to develop the rest of the park, south part of town.
And get it drained?
And get it drained, get it graded so that he could sell the land to homeowners. So that's kind of what happened there, but at least people could get around the town without having to go down to the square all the time, you know. Okay, if that's it, I'll shut up. All right, thank you. Thank you.
We got it.
God, it's my fault.
Yeah.